Before we get to our main project, I'd like you to help me welcome Joan Hawley. Hi, Joan, how are you?
Hi, Kay, I'm fine. How are you?
I am great. Joan is going to join us throughout this series to share some tips and techniques with us. So what have you got for us today, Joan?
I have a fabulous technique for embellishing the surface of a purse with ribbons.
Okay, so where do we get started?
Let's take a look. Now this little bag here is a bag done by a friend of mine, Cecile, and she came up with this technique, so it's because of her that we're going to share this.
Okay.
I used her style of embellishment and made the blue bag next to this. And we're going to walk through how to make that today. So let's get started. First of all, it's a very simple bag design, and I found this fabulous pack of fat quarters, and I wanted to put them all in my bag, but my bag is really small. So this technique is fabulous for this. Choose one fabric, and that's going to be the cover of our bag, and everything else is going to go on top of it. So here we've selected a fabric, and we cut a piece large enough for the whole bag.
Okay, that's this piece.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We've folded it in half and pressed it. You can see our little crease here. Mm-hmm. And we measured over a small amount and drew a line. And that's where we're going to get started.
Okay.
And what we're going to add to this is a series of ribbons that pull out all of the colors. We're going to use a little bit of iron-on fusible bias tape, which will add a little more gold to our project. And then we cut some simple strips from the rest of the pieces of that fat quarter pack.
Sounds easy enough.
It is easy. So let's get started. Let's see where the first piece of fabric goes. Would you like to choose a piece of fabric to start with for our first strip?
Wow, I like the one with the gold.
I do too. Now remember, we marked that line just off from the fold, and we're going to lay our fabrics right sides together, right up next to that chalk line.
Okay.
And we're going to go ahead and stitch it in place. So let's take a look at that. Now we're just using a standard size needle. We have cotton thread in there. And nobody's going to see this stitching, so it doesn't matter what kind of thread we use.
Okay.
And we're just going to stitch through both layers of fabric. And we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam, but that doesn't have to be accurate. It doesn't really matter because we're simply trying to attach the two, and we want to make sure that they don't move. So we're going to do this and build up the surface of our bag. There we go. And this starts our design. So from here, if you'll take this over to the pressing station and fold it over, we'll see how the next piece comes onto our project. So there we're adding a little bit of gold. Now I really like that fabric that's underneath, and we don't want to lose all of that.
Right.
So when we cut our fabric strips, we made sure to include some more of our project to make sure we don't lose all of that. Now attaching the next strip, if you'd like to choose one, is as easy as putting the first one on.
Let's go with this one that you like so much
from the
background.
Then we're going to do right sides together. We're going to match our edges. And this simple technique of right sides together and matching edges is going to build the surface of our project. So it's just that simple. And you could do strips of any width. You can add any colors in. We happen to work from that fat quarter pack, so all the fabrics were already coordinated for us. And just by cutting little snippets, short narrow strips of each one, we're able to put the same amount of each fabric into the project. And if you'll go ahead and flip and press that, we're just going to stitch and flip our way up the project. Now there's also a piece of batting behind this project, which we'll add a little bit later. And we're not sewing through that because we're going to sew another layer on top of this, and we didn't want too much bulk when we get to that final step. So we're just going to continue adding our strips, and we just have a few more to do. And here we go. I think we've put 5 on each side. This would be a fabulous technique to use on any size bag project. I can see using a bag that had a pieced front, maybe a 4-patch or a 9-patch, and take some of the elements of those blocks and do a surface embellishment on each one, and it would look like you really did a lot of work. But as you can see, this is pretty easy so far. So here we go. If you'll go ahead and press that open.
Okay.
Now see, all of our colors are coming together here. And let me finish adding these last 2 strips, and then we'll get to the good part. You know we like to get to that part.
Right.
And the good part is when we start looking at adding the ribbons on top of our fabric strips. So you can use this in so many places. It's a quick and easy technique. And remember, we started with strips that were all the same size, but when we're finished, it's going to look like we had strips of different sizes.
Okay, press again.
Press again if you would. And I'll pick out one last fabric. I want to add a little more gold up top, so we're going to put another one of those on. And our strips here are wider than our base fabric, and that's fantastic because we can't get it wrong. So we'll match up our edges.
That's what we like, things that you can't get wrong.
I know. You can always cut them too short and then have to redo it. If you cut them too long, you just go with the project and then cut off the extra when you're done. So when we're finished sewing on this strip, we get to the fun part, which is where we get to play with the ribbons. And we're going to see how all of these strips that started off as the same size are going to end up looking like a different size.
Okay.
So there we go. We're going to finish folding or finish our pressing. And the last thing that we're going to do to this, I'm going to do one more row of stitching because this is the edge of our project and we don't have another strip to cover it. And while we're going to put the ribbons on, let's just hold it in place with one more row of stitching because it can't hurt to take that extra minute and just go ahead and secure that so we can finish our project. You could do this technique with different sizes and shapes of fabric strips. You could do some crazy quilting. You can get out your velvets and organzas. All right, now here's the fun part, Kay.
Okay.
This is what we started with, our blue fabric for the base. We added all of our strips that are the same width. All right, Kay, now we're going to start the fun part, which is playing with ribbons.
Okay.
So I'm going to cut a few lengths and hand them to you, and you just place them anywhere you want, covering seams or not covering seams. And what's nice is, again, we're cutting them longer than we need them. We've got a couple of different widths here. And now's the time when you go to, oh, that might be too short. Let's see. Now's the time when you go around your sewing room, a little too short, and find everything that's in these color families and just throw them on to see what they look like. Oh, that looks good. Now don't forget we can add a little more gold with our fusible bias tape. And what's nice about this is you can put ribbons on top of ribbons, so you can stack them in different sizes. You can balance out the color, maybe a little more gold in through here. And line everything up the way you want it to look when it's finished. And don't forget we've got buttons we can play with.
Those are neat.
Aren't those fun? And we're just going to add a couple of more buttons wherever they look good to us.
Is this a good place to put buttons when you only have like one left?
It's a fabulous way to use up those leftovers. And sometimes if you have a collection of something that goes together with itself, but maybe not with your project, if you put enough of them on, it becomes part of the design and stands alone but blends. And here we've tried 2 different sets of buttons. Let's also audition some beads and see how those look. And we're not suggesting use all of this, but pick what works, embellish your fabric, and here we've created a new piece of fabric to make a wonderful small bag.
Let's take a look at the bag.
And there's our finished sample.
And I notice you've got ribbons going through the handles.
I wanted a little more gold toward the top of the bag, so when I attached the handles, I used some of our fusible bias tape and attached that to the handle tab as well.
Joan, I want to thank you for coming and sharing your techniques and tips for adding embellishments, buttons, and all these kinds of trims. It's been great.
Thank you, Kay. It's an easy way to build a fabric from scraps left over in your sewing space.